is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. As always, thank you for joining us on our journey this evening, whether you are actively watching us or just using us as background noise. We have plenty of pit stops we want to make tonight, but first, it's been nearly 8 months since the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, ending the longest war in U.S. history. The withdrawal came as the Taliban finished its takeover of the country, reclaiming control of Afghanistan for the first time since the U.S. invasion began in 2001. When they were previously in control, the Taliban set strict rules based on how they interpreted Islam. They banned things like TV, Western music and dancing, and tightly limited the lives of women in particular. They couldn't go to school or work outside the house, they were required to wear burqas, and regularly faced public executions for alleged adultery. After the Taliban were overthrown and the new Afghan government was established, women could finally go to school, and by 2018, roughly 4 in 10 Afghan students were girls, including roughly a quarter of all students in higher education. After coming back into power late last year, the Taliban faced pressure from the international community to allow girls to go to school and keep up with more moderate policies, which they initially promised to do. Unfortunately, they didn't stick to their word. Since the government fell, many countries cut their funding to Afghanistan, and the US still has sanctions on the Taliban. It's led to a dire humanitarian crisis in the country, with food shortages and rising prices, plus hundreds of thousands of people are out of jobs because of the Taliban's restrictions on women working. The UN estimated that almost half the country is dealing with hunger, and that 1 million Afghan children are severely malnourished. It's compounded by a measles outbreak, which has killed over 140 children and infected thousands more. In January, the UN asked for its largest aid grant to one country ever, calling for $4.4 billion to help Afghanistan. At the same time that Afghan children are dealing with hunger and disease, girls and young women are left wondering if they will ever finish their education. High schools there have been closed to girls for over a month, with no clear sign of when they'll reopen. Newsy's Amber Strong spoke to some people living in Afghanistan to show us just how challenging it's become for women to get an education.
Images of women trapped in cages and fighting for food, all captured by journalist Hizbullah Khan in his home of Afghanistan.
Currently, the Taliban are using women rights for their bargaining.
He calls it a glimpse of everyday life since the Taliban takeover last fall.
They don't have any source to feed their children, to feed themselves.
There's a nationwide hunger crisis with women taking the brunt. According to the UN, 100% of female-led households aren't getting enough to eat. Many career women are now unable to work, with female employment in the country expected to drop to 28% or lower this year.
A lot of women are breadwinners to their families, and depriving them of their right to work will also deprive a whole family of their right to eat, their right to survive.
Aisha Haram is a United Nations youth representative and college student in Berlin. She fled her home in Afghanistan to continue her studies.
I left the day when the Kabul airport was attacked. And at that night, I left by road and I crossed through 8 provinces. And it took me 2 days and 2 nights.
The women that remain have been denied basic rights, including education. The Taliban has walked back a promise to allow all girls beyond the 6th grade to return to school in March, citing a lack of space to keep the genders separate. According to a report from the Afghanistan Analyst Network, what exists now is spotty, with girls in some provinces back in the classroom, but not all.
In most rural parts of the countries, what made young people be easily recruited by insurgent groups was the lack of educational and job opportunities.
In March, the U.S. joined a host of nations pledging $204 million in additional humanitarian aid, while calling for women's rights to learn. However, a report from UN advisors blames the humanitarian crisis partly on the U.S. for withholding billions in assets, something the State Department calls inaccurate.
They say if you educate a man, you're just educating a person. But if you're educating a woman, you're educating a family and possibly a generation.
Wajima Ayubi is an Afghan native, activist, and entrepreneur who uses her textile company to employ women in the country while living abroad.
I'm also working with a group of friends to build an online e-school so that the women, girls that cannot go to school, they could attend school online, and we have these classes for them.
She isn't alone. Other activists are spreading education to women despite the risk. But there are threats for men's education too. Schools with large Hazara Muslim populations have been the target of bombings, killing dozens last week alone.
Hazaras are being killed while they are worshiping, while they are praying, and they're just an ethnic minority, very peaceful people. They don't deserve this.
Activists in the country are losing another battle, the war of words. Khan uses his social media to get the word out, but it's risky.
If you cover the brutal policies of the Taliban, abruptly the Taliban will find you, they will capture you, then they will torture you, and then they will kill you.
World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus addressed the lack of international attention recently.
The whole attention to Ukraine is very important, of course, because it impacts the whole world. But even a fraction of it is not being given to Tigray, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and the rest.
Khan says he doesn't blame the West, he blames the Taliban, full stop, but can't help but feel abandonment from fellow journalists.
They are living in the hell, and they have the power to take out these people from the hell.
Haram says while she misses her native land, being abroad does give her the freedom to speak.
I cannot stay silent, and I owe that country that gave me so much, that made me who I am today.
She is one part of a new generation that has tasted democracy and won't let go. Amber Strong, Newsy, Washington.